Denver International Airport was buzzing as usual that morning. Travelers hurried through gleaming corridors, carry-on bags trailing behind nervous hands, and flight announcements echoed in the air. But for Samantha Lee, it was just another day at work. Dressed in the crisp navy blue uniform of Atlantic Skies, the flight attendant was preparing for a high-class flight bound for New York. Known among her colleagues for her dedication and uncanny ability to remain calm in tense situations, Samantha was ready for whatever the day might bring. Yet, there was something in the air, a subtle unease she couldn't quite place. As she mentally reviewed safety protocols and double-checked the cabin, a strange sense of foreboding crept over her. It wasn't long before she would find out why. Passengers began boarding, carrying the usual mix of emotions: anxiety, impatience, excitement. Samantha greeted them with a practiced, polite smile, but one passenger in particular caught her eye. Alexandra Graves, a woman in her early 50s, stepped into the cabin with deliberate, confident strides. Her sharp gaze was almost defiant. She wore a flawless black blazer paired with a striking red hat emblazoned with the words, "Make America Great Again." She was impossible to ignore, not just because of the hat but because of the commanding energy she exuded. Alexandra moved with such self-assurance that fellow passengers avoided her gaze. Some whispered amongst themselves, while others pretended not to notice. Samantha discreetly observed as Alexandra settled into a first-class seat, crossed her legs elegantly, and immediately began speaking loudly on her phone. A flashback raced through Samantha's mind. A similar incident months earlier, when a passenger had refused to turn off their phone during takeoff, sparking a tense situation that nearly delayed the flight. From then on, Samantha always stayed vigilant for signs of potential trouble on board. "Another day, another dollar, right?" joked her crew mate, Michael, handing her the day's instructions. "Maybe not," Samantha replied, casting a quick glance at Alexandra, still engrossed in her loud conversation. As boarding continued, murmurs of discontent began to arise. A woman seated 2 rows behind Alexandra approached Samantha, clearly uncomfortable. "Excuse me," she began, her tone laced with frustration, "but that lady, I just wanted a peaceful flight. Is that too much to ask?" Samantha took a deep breath and nodded. Diffusing minor conflicts was part of the job, but something told her this situation had the potential to escalate. Maintaining her usual poise, she approached Alexandra. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we'll need you to finish your call before takeoff," she said, her voice calm yet firm. Alexandra looked up, surprised but not entirely taken aback. A faintly sarcastic smile curved her lips. "Are you talking to me?" "Yes, ma'am. It's a safety requirement." "Safety, of course," Alexandra replied, ending the call with a theatrical flourish and an unmistakable note of disdain. "Let's see how the service is on this flight." As Samantha returned to her station, those words lingered in her mind. Dealing with difficult passengers was nothing new, but something about this woman unsettled her. Alexandra wasn't just another challenging customer. There was an air of mystery behind her defiance. The boarding process wrapped up, and the plane prepared for taxiing. Samantha conducted her final cabin check but couldn't help sneaking another glance at Alexandra, now engrossed in a magazine, looking unbothered. Little did Samantha know, this particular passenger was the owner of the airline she worked for. And over the next few hours, her life was about to take an unexpected turn. Samantha recalled her grandmother's advice, a strong woman who often said, "Always do what feels right, even when it's the harder choice." Taking a deep breath, she resolved to trust her instincts, unaware that this decision would soon be tested in ways she never imagined. What would you do in Samantha's shoes? Follow protocol or trust your gut? Stay tuned to find out how one choice can change everything. The Atlantic Skies aircraft soared gently into the blue sky, leaving Denver behind. For most passengers, the flight promised a peaceful stretch of reading, naps, or movies on the entertainment system. For Samantha, however, the atmosphere carried a tension that grew steadily, like storm clouds brewing in the distance. Shortly after reaching cruising altitude, Alexandra signaled Samantha with a sharp gesture. "Miss, could you bring me sparkling water? And please, don't take too long," she requested with a smile that barely masked her impatience. Samantha maintained her professional demeanor and fulfilled the request. But upon her return, she found Alexandra in a heated exchange with the passenger beside her. The man, visibly uncomfortable, raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. "I'm just saying people should be more grateful for what this country gives them," Alexandra declared, while the man tried to defuse the situation. Samantha calmly stepped in. "Ma'am, I kindly ask that you keep the conversation at a lower volume for everyone's comfort." Alexandra turned to Samantha, her irritation now thinly veiled. "I wasn't aware there was a limit on free speech on this flight. Doesn't Atlantic Skies support freedom of expression?" Her comments sparked murmurs throughout first class, and Samantha sensed the situation slipping out of control. She stepped back briefly to consult Michael, who gave her a concerned look. "We need to handle this quickly, Sam. If this tension keeps up, it could escalate." Samantha recalled a specific training session on managing difficult passengers. The instructor's words echoed in her mind. Always try to calm the waters before resorting to drastic measures. Returning to the cabin, Samantha tried a different approach. "Ma'am, I understand your position, but I ask that you consider the comfort of all passengers. Is there anything I can do to make your experience more pleasant?" Alexandra stared at Samantha for a long, uncomfortable moment before letting out an exaggerated sigh. Fine. You're all making this a bigger deal than it needs to be." For a brief moment, it seemed the flight would proceed peacefully. But like a sudden storm, Alexandra retrieved her red hat from her bag and placed it back on her head. The sight sparked uneasy glances around her, and Samantha noticed murmurs of complaint rising among the passengers. A young man seated toward the back of first class approached Samantha. "With all due respect, I don't think it's appropriate for someone to wear something like that on a flight. It's provocative." Samantha knew the situation was becoming untenable. She recalled dealing with a group of drunken passengers on a late-night flight. She had acted swiftly to prevent chaos. But this decision felt more complex. After a brief consultation with Michael, who supported her decision to act, Samantha approached Alexandra again. This time, her tone was more resolute. "Ma'am, as a member of the crew, I must ask you to put the hat away. It's causing discomfort to other passengers, and we aim to ensure a pleasant experience for everyone." Alexandra rose slowly, her gaze locking onto Samantha with intensity. "You're asking me to hide who I am? That's absurd. Who do you think you are to tell me what I can or can't do?" Before Samantha could respond, Alexandra gathered her belongings and made her way toward the back of the plane, drawing more startled looks. She seemed intent on creating a larger scene, but Samantha was determined to maintain order. After a tense dialogue, Samantha made the decision to inform the captain. Following a quick consultation, it was agreed that Alexandra would be removed from the flight upon landing in Chicago, where a scheduled layover awaited. Alexandra made no effort to conceal her outrage but complied, vowing there would be consequences. As she was escorted off the plane, Samantha thought back to her first flight as a flight attendant. She had once doubted her ability to make tough decisions, but in that moment, she realized how much she had grown. Yet, she couldn't have imagined the profound ripple effect her actions would have. Chicago woke to a gray, foggy sky as the Atlantic Skies plane touched down smoothly on the runway. The captain thanked the passengers for their patience during the layover and announced a brief break before the flight resumed its journey to New York. Inside the plane, however, the tension lingered like an unspoken weight. While the passengers awaited clearance to temporarily disembark, Samantha gathered the last of Alexandra's belongings, still processing everything that had unfolded. Alexandra had been escorted off the plane by ground staff without further incident. But her parting words echoed relentlessly in Samantha's mind. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life, girl. I'll make sure you don't forget it." After organizing the items left in Alexandra's seat, Samantha was summoned to the crew briefing room at the airport. The voice over the radio was formal and urgent, heightening her unease. When she entered the room, the sight of Alexandra was her first shock. Seated at the head of the table, still wearing her immaculate blazer and a steely expression, was the woman Samantha had dismissed as just another difficult passenger. "Samantha, at last!" Alexandra exclaimed, her tone dripping with irony. Next to her stood Elliot Parker, the regional manager for Atlantic Skies, who looked at Samantha with a mixture of sympathy and unease. "Samantha, I need you to understand the gravity of this situation," Elliot began, but Alexandra raised her hand to cut him off. "I'll explain it myself," Alexandra said, turning her sharp gaze to Samantha. "You, Samantha, made the decision to remove a woman from your flight today. A woman who happens to be the founder and CEO of this airline." The words hit Samantha like a cold wave. Her face flushed, and for a moment, she couldn't find the words. She attempted to stammer out a response, but Alexandra didn't give her the chance. "Do you think you understand leadership? What it means to make hard decisions? Because, quite frankly, you showed very little discernment today." There was a pause as Alexandra leaned forward, her eyes locking onto Samantha's. "However," she continued, "I must admit, I saw something in you today. You stood by your convictions even knowing it might cause trouble. That's something I can respect. But the question remains, did you know you were wrong?" Samantha, finally regaining her composure, answered firmly, "I followed protocol and did what I believed was necessary to maintain a safe and respectful environment on the flight. If I had to do it again, I wouldn't change my decision." A brief silence settled over the room. Alexandra raised an eyebrow, as if weighing every word Samantha had said. Well, it seems you've got more backbone than I expected," Alexandra remarked, leaning back in her chair. Elliot, visibly uncomfortable, stepped in. "Samantha, Alexandra will be the one to decide your future with Atlantic Skies. In the meantime, you're suspended from your duties as a flight attendant." As Samantha left the room, a storm of emotions churned within her. Pride in standing by her principles clashed with the fear of losing the job she loved so much. The memory of her father, a veteran pilot who had always told her to do what's right, even when it's hard, provided a small measure of comfort. But there was something in the way Alexandra had looked at her, an intensity that felt less like judgment and more like curiosity. Samantha couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't merely a reprimand. It felt like a test. But a test for what? Samantha left the briefing room with slow, deliberate steps, her mind racing. Being suspended was something she never thought would happen, especially over a decision she believed was the right one. Learning that Alexandra Graves was the founder of Atlantic Skies made the situation feel even more surreal. She found a quiet corner in the airport and dialed Rachel, her best friend and confidant, who was also a flight attendant at another airline. As she waited for the call to connect, her mind drifted to the moment she decided to pursue a career in aviation. It was a dream inspired by her father, a pilot who spent years telling her stories about the freedom of the skies and the challenge of making quick decisions. Rachel answered the phone with an upbeat tone that quickly shifted as Samantha poured out her frustration. "Wait, you kicked the CEO off the plane? Sam, that sounds like something out of a movie. I didn't know who she was, Ratch." She was making everyone uncomfortable, And I did what I had to do, Rachel sighed. You followed your instincts, which is admirable, but Alexandra Graves is notorious for being ruthless. People say she built Atlantic Skies from the ground up while facing competitors who tried to crush her. This won't be easy to fix. I know, but there's something about her that doesn't add up. It felt like she was testing me, almost as if she wanted this to happen. After hanging up, Samantha decided not to waste her suspension. She'd go home, reflect on everything, and if given a chance to redeem herself, she'd make it count. On the way back, she recalled her first flight attendant training. Back then, she had been nervous, afraid to confront difficult passengers. But after an incident where she successfully calmed an irate traveler and avoided an emergency, she realized her job was about more than following rules. It was about leadership. When she got home, a notification pinged on her phone. An email from Alexandra Graves. The message was brief. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. My office in New York. Don't be late. The cryptic tone left Samantha uneasy. Alexandra hadn't mentioned termination or hinted that the meeting would be punitive. It was direct, almost intriguing. Was this an opportunity? Or a final humiliation before being dismissed? The next morning, Samantha arrived at Atlantic Skies headquarters in New York. A sleek, modern building with gleaming windows reflecting the morning sun. A receptionist escorted her to the top floor, where Alexandra's office dominated the space. The room was minimalist yet commanding. A massive glass desk, walls adorned with photos of aircraft, and industry awards. Alexandra stood by the window, gazing out. She didn't turn when Samantha entered. Samantha, Alexandra began, her tone steady. I didn't get to where I am by being complacent. This industry is a battlefield. And the last thing I need is someone who hesitates when faced with a challenge. Samantha held her ground, keeping her voice steady. With all due respect, Ms. Graves, I didn't hesitate. I did what I believed was right. Alexandra finally turned, a faint smile playing on her lips. Exactly. And that's why you're here. Samantha blinked, confused. Wait, are you saying my suspension was a test? Alexandra crossed her arms, her gaze sharp but thoughtful. Test, lesson, experience, call it what you want. I needed to see how you handle pressure. And I must say, you exceeded my expectations. The words caught Samantha off guard. She struggled to find the right response. I don't understand. Why put me in that position? Alexandra walked over to her desk, picked up a black folder, and slid it across the glass surface toward Samantha. In this folder are details for a pilot program I want to launch. Advanced leadership training for promising employees. People who can be the next leaders of this company. I want you to be the first participant. Samantha's father's words echoed in her mind. Sometimes, a setback is just an invitation in disguise for something greater. Looking at Alexandra, she realized this was her chance. Not just to prove herself as a flight attendant, but as someone capable of rising to challenges beyond the ordinary. Alexandra settled into her chair, her smile softening. So, Samantha, are you ready to take off in a new direction? Samantha left Alexandra's office feeling like she'd just stepped off an emotional roller coaster. The invitation to join the pilot program was an opportunity she had never imagined. But what did it really mean? Was Alexandra trying to mold her into someone who fit better into Atlantic Skies culture? Or was there another motive behind it? In the folder Alexandra had handed her were the details of the program, called Maximum Altitude. It was described as an intensive training designed to develop leadership, resilience, and decision-making under pressure. The phrase leadership in times of crisis stood out to Samantha. It felt almost personal, as though Alexandra had written it with her in mind. During her first year as a flight attendant, Samantha had faced a challenging situation when a passenger suffered a medical emergency mid-flight. She had rallied the other passengers, stabilized the man, and ensured everything was handled before an emergency landing. The incident had earned her praise from the crew and solidified her belief that she could act decisively under pressure. Now, it seemed Alexandra wanted to push her even further. The following week, Samantha began the program at Atlantic Sky's state-of-the-art training center on the outskirts of New York. Alongside 5 other selected employees, she underwent a series of intense exercises simulating high-pressure scenarios, emergency evacuations, mock negotiations with hostile passengers, and even psychological training to handle public criticism. One of the instructors, a former military pilot named Marcus Hayes, was relentless in his challenges. Leadership isn't just about giving orders, he'd say. It's staying calm when everyone around you is losing their head. And that's where most of you will fail, because I want to see who has the guts to get back up. Samantha excelled in the practical exercises, but it was during the debates and case analyses that she felt the real pressure. One of the most intense days involved examining a fictional scenario in which a captain and crew disagreed on whether to abort a landing during a storm. The wrong decision had led to chaos. Each participant was required to analyze the case and explain what they would have done. When it was Samantha's turn, she took a deep breath and began. To me, leadership is about trusting your team and knowing when to listen. But it's also about accepting that, in the end, the responsibility is yours. I would have aborted the landing because, in this case, safety comes before the schedule. Marcus didn't respond immediately, but Alexandra, watching from a distance, gave a small, approving smile. After the session, Alexandra invited Samantha for a private conversation. "You're doing well. Better than I expected. Actually," Alexandra said as they strolled through the training center's courtyard. "Thank you, Ms. Graves," Samantha replied, unsure how to interpret the compliment. "Stop calling me Ms. Graves," Alexandra said with a hint of humor. "Alexandra is fine. From what I've seen, you've already proven you deserve to be here. But let me be honest. I chose you because I saw something in you, a courage most people don't have. And I want to see how far it goes. May I ask why?" Samantha ventured, her curiosity finally overpowering her hesitation. Alexandra stopped and looked at Samantha, her eyes glinting with a mix of pride and challenge. "Because I see myself in you. When I started Atlantic Skies, I faced a world that told me to stay quiet, to follow orders without question. But I refused. And now I want people on my team who have that same spirit." Alexandra's words brought back a childhood memory for Samantha. She had once been scolded for standing up for a classmate. At the time, her mother had told her, "Never apologize for doing what's right." It felt as though that lesson had guided her to this moment. In the days that followed, Samantha realized the program was not just an opportunity to learn. It was a personal challenge. She was being shaped not just as an employee but as a potential leader. With each new task, the pressure mounted, but so did her confidence. How far could Samantha go? Could she balance her convictions with Alexandra's expectations? Only time would tell. The maximum altitude program was reaching its final phase, and Samantha felt the weight of expectations pressing heavily on her shoulders. More than ever, she knew Alexandra was watching her every move. Although she had surpassed numerous challenges, there was a lingering sense that something bigger was looming, something that would test not just her skills but also her resolve. That morning, the participants were gathered in a spacious, modern room where Marcus Hayes awaited them with his commanding presence. Alexandra sat in the back, accompanied by 2 other Atlantic Skies executives. Marcus began with his signature no-nonsense approach. "Up to now, you've dealt with hypothetical scenarios and controlled situations. Today, the game changes. We're testing how you act in real time with real consequences, The group murmured in anticipation. Samantha's heart raced. Marcus explained the exercise. The participants would be placed on a real commercial flight, posing as part of the crew. During the flight, unforeseen scenarios would be introduced, requiring quick and effective responses. The goal was to evaluate their leadership and teamwork under pressure. Samantha was assigned as the crew leader for the exercise. The flight was a short trip from New York to Boston, lasting just over an hour. However, Marcus warned them, "Don't underestimate this. Even a short flight can become a nightmare if you lose control." As the plane took off, Samantha and her team began interacting with the passengers, following standard procedures. Everything seemed calm, but Samantha knew it was only a matter of time before the challenges began. Shortly after reaching cruising altitude, the first issue arose. A passenger simulated a medical emergency, collapsing in the aisle while other passengers, actors hired for the exercise, started shouting for help. Samantha took charge, delegating tasks and reassuring the rest of the passengers. As she managed the situation, she noticed Alexandra seated in first class, observing everything closely. Though she wasn't part of the exercise, her presence was a constant reminder that this was more than just a test. Samantha successfully handled the medical emergency, but another incident quickly followed. An aggressive passenger began arguing with one of the flight attendants, threatening to disrupt the cabin's calm. Once again, Samantha stepped in, using her calm but firm tone to defuse the tension. "Sir, I understand your frustration, but I need you to remain calm. We're here to help, but that's only possible if we work together," she said. The man hesitated before finally backing down. Just as Samantha thought things were under control, Marcus announced over the internal communication system that the plane would encounter unexpected turbulence. The turbulence began lightly but soon grew intense. Both real and fictitious passengers began showing signs of nervousness. Samantha knew it was crucial to keep everyone calm. "Crew, ensure all passengers are seated and seatbelts fastened," she announced over the intercom, her voice steady. As she moved through the cabin, ensuring everyone was secure, she noticed Alexandra standing, gripping the back of a seat for support. Samantha approached quickly. "Ma'am, please sit down. It's dangerous to remain standing." "I'm not here as a passenger," Alexandra replied, crossing her arms. "I want to see how you lead." The turbulence worsened, and Samantha faced a dilemma. Insist that Alexandra sit down or focus on the other passengers. For her, leadership meant ensuring everyone's safety, including the CEO's. "With all due respect, Alexandra, if you want to see leadership, sit down and follow my instructions." "We're in an emergency," Samantha said, meeting Alexandra's gaze directly. For a moment, Alexandra looked surprised but eventually nodded and took her seat. The turbulence soon subsided, and the plane landed in Boston without further issues. Samantha exhaled in relief, but she knew the test wasn't over until she heard Alexandra and Marcus's evaluations. Back at the training center, Alexandra requested a private conversation with Samantha. In the meeting room, the CEO crossed her arms and studied the younger woman for a moment before speaking. "You realize that, on the plane, you gave me an order?" Alexandra said, one eyebrow raised. "Yes, ma'am, Alexandra. Because it was the right thing to do," Samantha replied. Alexandra's smile was faint but unmistakable. "Courage and clarity in moments of crisis. It's not something I see often. You were exceptional today, Samantha. I want you to know my decision to include you in this program was the right one." "Thank you," Samantha said, feeling a mix of relief and pride. Alexandra hesitated before adding, "You reminded me of myself. When I started Atlantic Skies, I was someone who wasn't afraid to challenge authority, even when it was risky. And you know what I learned? Sometimes that's exactly what's needed." Samantha recalled her father's words. "True leadership shows up when you least expect it, but you have to be ready for it." In that moment, she realized she had gained more than Alexandra's respect. She had gained confidence in herself. The day of the maximum altitude program graduation arrived, bringing with it an air of anticipation to the modern auditorium of Atlantic Skies. Samantha sat among the other participants, feeling a mixture of pride and nervousness. Over the past weeks, she had faced challenges that transformed her not only as a professional but as a person. And now, she was about to discover what the next chapter of her journey would be. Alexandra Graves took the stage to give the closing speech. As always, her presence was commanding. Dressed in an elegant gray suit, she looked directly at the participants before beginning to speak. Today, we celebrate a group of individuals who have shown not only competence but something more important: courage. The courage to lead, to make difficult decisions, and, above all, to grow. As Alexandra spoke, Samantha recalled each pivotal moment of the program. From simulated turbulence to tense conversations with the CEO, everything seemed to culminate in this moment. After the speech, Alexandra began calling the participants to the stage to receive their certificates. When it was Samantha's turn, the CEO paused, holding the certificate for a moment longer. "Samantha Lee," Alexandra began, looking directly at her. "You entered this program as someone with potential. Today, I see you as an emerging leader. And I have something more for you." The audience murmured in curiosity. Alexandra signaled for one of the assistants to bring an envelope. Samantha took it with trembling hands. "Inside this envelope is an offer for a new position at Atlantic Skies," Alexandra continued. "I want you to work directly with me, helping to implement improvements in leadership and team training. Your courage and determination will be essential to transform the way we operate." Samantha was speechless. The audience applauded, but all she could hear was the rapid beating of her heart. "What do you say, Samantha? Are you ready to fly higher?" Alexandra asked with a small smile. "I accept," Samantha replied, her voice firm despite the emotion. In the following months, Samantha embraced her new role with dedication. Working alongside Alexandra, she discovered that the CEO was much more than the relentless woman she had once seemed to be. There were moments when Alexandra shared stories of her own journey, the sacrifices, the losses, and the times she almost gave up. "You know," Alexandra said one evening, as they reviewed a new project together, "seeing you reminds me why I started all of this. Atlantic Skies isn't just a company to me. It's a legacy, and I want people like you to be part of that." Samantha smiled, feeling inspired. "Thank you, Alexandra. You challenged me in ways I never expected, and now I know I'm capable of so much more." Samantha recalled her first interaction with Alexandra, when she had removed her from the flight without knowing who she was. At the time, she feared the consequences. Now, she saw that moment as the turning point of her life, a choice that had defined her as a leader. One afternoon, as Alexandra and Samantha walked through the Atlantic Skies hangar, watching the planes being serviced, Alexandra suddenly stopped and turned to Samantha. "You know, don't you? This is just the beginning. Leadership isn't about reaching a destination. It's about continuing to challenge yourself." Samantha nodded, watching the metallic gleam of the aircraft under the sun. She knew her journey wouldn't be easy, but now, she felt ready for anything. "I'm ready for whatever comes," she responded with confidence. The two exchanged a knowing smile before continuing their walk. Above them, the sky seemed limitless, a reminder that true leadership is like flying. It takes courage to take off and strength to keep moving toward the unknown. Samantha Lee's story is a reminder that sometimes the hardest challenges are the ones that take us the furthest. And in the end, the sky isn't the limit, it's just the beginning.